What if NASA had already made contact with an extraterrestrial civilization and you were never warned? Imagine for a moment that everything we know about space, about NASA missions, about signals coming from the depths of the universe, is just the tip of a much darker iceberg. An iceberg that is being deliberately hidden from the population. Dates. Dozens of unexplained signals have been captured by space agencies, but one in particular caught our attention. An audio file, classified as confidential, which would have been intercepted during a secret mission conducted by NASA itself. This audio was never officially released, but it was leaked. And he doesn't sound human at all. Much less natural. NASA denies it. He always denied it. But is it possible to hide the truth for so long, with so much evidence coming to light? What if this is the biggest secret of modern space exploration? Direct contact with non-human intelligences. Silenced, muffled, hidden in the dark corridors of the most powerful space agency on the planet. Have you ever stopped to think why so many NASA files still remain sealed under the label of top secret? Or why did several former employees, including astronauts, report experiences that could not be explained but were immediately silenced? Why does NASA insist on withholding details about some of its most controversial missions, while more and more compromising documents and images are leaked by internal sources? Today, you will have access to information that has never appeared in the traditional news. You will hear excerpts from this supposed secret audio and understand why. It has been kept from public knowledge until now. A tase. But first, I need to show you something even more disturbing. What NASA knows and has never revealed could completely change what you believe about our place in the universe. But before I show you this, I need you to understand one thing. None of this comes to you by chance. There is a reason why this information leaks in small fragments, why documents mysteriously disappear, and why audio like this is archived and never mentioned in official NASA interviews. You are about to see and hear something that may never be available again. And if this video is taken down, as has happened with other similar content, you will know exactly why. That's why, if you want to continue receiving content that shows what's really happening inside NASA, behind the curtains of space missions and official communications, you need to be part of this community now. The truth only circulates when we come together to spread it. And if you've come this far, it's because you feel there's something more, something that is not being counted. And that's exactly what we're unveiling together here on the channel, so leave a like. This shows that you support content that challenges the official version of facts. And subscribe to the channel now, because in the next few minutes, you'll have access to snippets of supposed audio from NASA's first contact with a non-human intelligence, and you need to hear it before it disappears. Get ready. Because what you'll see next could completely change your perception of space, humanity, and NASA itself. Now pay attention. Because this is where the truth that they didn't want you to discover begins. In recent years, something has changed drastically in the way authorities talk about the unknown. NASA itself, alongside the Pentagon, began to publicly admit the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, the famous UAPs. These records, once derided as conspiracy theories, now appear in official hearings, declassified documents, and statements from former military personnel and astronauts. But what does this really mean? Are they really just beginning to investigate? Or are we seeing the beginning of a controlled revelation carefully engineered to prepare public opinion for something much bigger? If NASA, known for its scientific rigor and absolute control of data, begins to recognize the existence of inexplicable phenomena, it is because internal pressure has already surpassed the point of containment. What was previously vehemently denied is now treated with ambiguity. Words like unconfirmed, unidentified, anomalous are repeated in interviews with an almost rehearsed caution, which feeds the mystery without giving away the game. But what is behind? This dubious language. Why does the largest space agency on the planet, with access to the most advanced technologies and real-time data in the universe, avoid going beyond the obvious? Is it precautionary, or is it fear of revealing what has already been discovered a long time ago? In 2004, U.S. Navy pilots recorded an unknown object over the Pacific Ocean. The case became known as Tic Tac UFO. Videos were released. Reports were presented. And most surprising, many of these sightings took place in areas under direct surveillance by NASA. The agency preferred silence. In 2021, a Pentagon report confirmed more than 140 unexplained incidents, some of them directly linked to ongoing space missions. Coincidence, or fragments of something much bigger? Why then does this information continue to be treated as sensitive, restricted, classified? And why, even in the face of such repercussions, does NASA choose not to respond, not to clarify, not to take a direct position? The answer may lie between the lines, in incomplete reports, in documents that disappear, in audio broadcasts that are recorded but never released, in videos with interference that are leaked on hidden internet forums, and that are soon removed due to breaking guidelines, and in the testimonies of former employees who speak in codes, who whisper phrases like, "They found us first." This is not just fiction. This is what is circulating behind the scenes, in leaks, in files that never reach the general public. NASA knows this, and that's why it keeps its most controversial missions shrouded in layers of silence, confidentiality, and protocols that most people will never hear about. When a probe loses signal for no reason, when a rover on Mars stops transmitting without explanation, when a satellite picks up strange frequencies, but the data is archived. All of this forms a pattern of control, containment, concealment, and at the center of it all, possible contact, an event that, if confirmed, would call into question not only science as we know it, but also the social structure of Earth itself. Religion, politics, history, everything would change. And perhaps that is exactly why the revelation does not happen directly. Maybe they are just waiting for the right moment, or trying to stop that moment from happening. Meanwhile, signals continue to be picked up. Unusual frequencies continue to be analyzed silently. And inside NASA's cold rooms, in areas with restricted access, there are those who believe that contact has already happened. There are those who say that humanity has already heard and responded. But if all this is true, why don't we know? Yet who is behind the silence? And most importantly, how long will they be able to hide it? Now, take a deep breath. Because what comes next could be some of the most disturbing evidence ever presented to the public. If everything seems suggestive so far, get ready. We're going behind the scenes of one of the most secret and controversial audios ever attributed to NASA. A record that, according to leaks, should never have been heard by anyone outside the agency's laboratories. If you've been watching this far, it's because you feel like something isn't right, and that's why your opinion matters. Comment below. NASA already knows if you believe the contact is real, or write the truth. Needs to come out if you think it's past time to reveal everything. Let's move on. The next part is where the mystery begins to take shape, and it is precisely here that we begin to enter territory that is more delicate, more sensitive, and, perhaps, more real than we have been led to believe. The theory of direct contact between NASA and non-human civilizations is no longer a marginal idea, restricted to obscure internet forums or conspiratorial conversations in suburban basements. On the contrary, it gained strength, body, and credibility over the years. As documents were leaked, testimonies emerged, and specific details began to repeat themselves, as if different sources were narrating parts of the same story, separated by decades and continents. There are files labeled classified, that contain transcripts of coded communications picked up by NASA probes. There are records of anomalies in space missions that have never been officially explained, but which internal agency insiders described as low-intensity contact events. This means that something or someone responded to a signal. Sent, we are no longer talking about lights in the sky or unidentified objects crossing Earth's orbit. We are talking about response, interaction, communication. One of the most enigmatic reports, and at the same time most cited behind the scenes, is that of a supposed transmission intercepted during the Voyager program. According to a document attributed to a former NASA analyst, the probe would have received a modulated frequency pulse that does not correspond to any known natural pattern. This pulse contained a set of mathematical repetitions, something many consider to be the universal form of language, followed by timed temporal pauses, as if in an attempt to establish rhythm. The most disturbing thing is that, when trying to respond with the same pattern, NASA equipment would have registered a new frequency, a new code, something that seemed, in the words of the report itself, intentional. And still, no official explanation was given. No pronouncement, no mention. Why hide it? Why hide what could be definitive proof that we are not alone? The answer may be simpler and darker than we imagine. Control. Control of the narrative, control of public emotion, control over geopolitical, religious, scientific, and cultural implications. A confirmed contact would shake the structures of our society. And perhaps, at the top of the hierarchy of knowledge, there are those who would rather keep the world in ignorance than deal with the consequences of full revelation. Another point that strengthens this theory is the existence of zones of silence within NASA itself. Departments where only a select group of scientists and technicians have access to all the data captured by probes and satellites. Of the data that reaches the public has already gone through filters, reviews, and edits. And we're not just talking about visual editing. There are protocols to deal with any information that deviates from expected parameters. And many of these protocols were created in the 1970s, during the space race, when the fear of a contact event was taken very seriously behind the scenes. And it doesn't stop there. A theory that has gained strength among independent analysts is that contact has already been established. But not on Earth. It is believed that a NASA probe during the Mars Observer mission lost communication after detecting an electromagnetic pattern coming from the Martian subsurface. This pattern does not correspond to any known geological formation and would have been recorded for less than 17 seconds before the mission's abrupt halt. The probe was officially considered lost, but telemetry data, leaked years later by a former NASA employee, indicates that the ship's internal system executed an automatic protection command, something that only occurs when a threat or external interference is detected. The idea that we are not alone no longer scares us as much as the idea that we are already in contact. And this theory becomes even more complex when associated with lunar missions. Apollo 11, for example, carried an extra communications channel that was not broadcast to the public. During minutes of signal failure, as it was officially explained, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would have reported the presence of gigantic objects observing their descent. The audio was never officially recognized, but several amateur radio engineers claim to have picked up the transmission directly. The content, a whisper, followed by the phrase, "They're here. They're watching. What happened next?" Silence. The astronauts returned and fell silent. Armstrong, throughout his life, avoided the subject with visible discomfort. And even after his death, NASA never commented on the alleged leak. Why does the agency that is so proud of its space achievements avoid answering the most basic questions about these occurrences? Why does she insist on treating these reports as unfounded rumors, when there is evidence, testimonies, and, in some cases, even images? There is, indeed, a theory that ties all of this together, that there is a structure within NASA itself, perhaps beyond the reach of the public and even many employees, dedicated exclusively to the management of information linked to non-human life. A hidden sector, a division that operates in the shadows, where the protocol is simple. Deny, discredit, and bury any trace of contact. But this structure begins to fail. With the digital age, more and more data escapes. More and more people have access to images in real time. Private satellites, open communications, artificial intelligence. The truth begins to leak through the gaps that were previously shielded. And the more the public questions, the more NASA gets caught up in its own versions. Perhaps you have never heard of the document known as the Silent Protocol. It would have been developed to deal with the scenario of non-human communication captured during a mission. The protocol determines the immediate interruption of transmission, signal isolation, closed analysis, and, if necessary, the reconstruction of data with an alternative narrative. This would explain why so many NASA videos appear cut with edited sections, with seconds skipped without justification, and why images of UFOs near the International Space Station are always transmission failures. Always, it's not hard to understand why the public is starting to connect the dots. Why are so many channels investigating? And why do you, who are watching this now, feel like you are about to discover something that goes far beyond what has been told to date? If you believe that NASA is already in contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, comment below. Silence says it all. Now, if you want more concrete evidence before drawing your conclusions, write tests now in the comments. Let's move on. Because what comes now will directly affect your senses and perhaps everything you believe about reality. And now that you understand the depth of contact theory, it's time to go even deeper into the evidence. And we're not talking about assumptions or vague interpretations. We are talking about real fragments, records that have emerged over the years, and that, even ignored by the mainstream media and silenced by authorities, continue to echo behind the scenes of the most serious investigations into NASA, its hidden protocols, and contact with non-human entities. Some of this evidence was even considered impossible to deny by independent experts, precisely because of the way it emerged, from within. Through leaks, through failures in containment, or by people who simply could no longer bear to live with the weight of the secret. One of the most emblematic cases occurred in 2015, when a hacker, who later became known as NASA's Edward Snowden, managed to access the agency's internal servers and removed a series of files, labeled Internal Use Only and Restricted Access Level 3. Among them was a document titled Alpha Delta Protocol, Interaction Contingency. The content? A list of standardized instructions for dealing with non-human intelligence signals. The protocol provided for actions such as shutting down public communications, redirecting media attention, and creating an alternative narrative based on natural phenomena or technical failures. In other words, if contact was made, the public would never know. What's more, this protocol made it clear that there were already simulations based on previous contacts. Which raises the question, why simulate something that never happened? Another important detail of this leak was the mention of a red signal 723 Delta, which would have been captured by NASA probes in Saturn's orbit. A pulsed signal with precise rhythmic intervals and variations that suggest linguistic structure or code. The origin of the signal was recorded as intelligence unknown. And what did NASA do? He declared that the signal was possibly interference from military equipment and never raised the issue again. However, in forums where researchers analyze leaks from the agency, this signal is still debated today as one of the most evident communications with non-human life ever recorded. But it's not just digital files that speak. People who were inside, who experienced the agency's daily life, began to break the silence. One of the best known is Edgar Mitchell, astronaut of the Apollo 14 mission. sixth man to set foot on the moon. In several interviews before his death, Mitchell stated in clear terms, NASA is aware of the existence of extraterrestrial life. Contact has already occurred. What's more, he said that the United States government was involved in a pact of silence with these entities, ensuring that the information was kept restricted to only the highest levels. When asked if he had seen anything in person, Mitchell responded, "I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I've talked to people who have, and I trust them with my life." These reports don't just come from astronauts. Telecommunications engineers, data analysts, maintenance technicians, common professionals, but who had access to critical moments also began to speak. A former NASA employee, whose name was withheld for security reasons, reported in a private conference that images of a hexagonal structure on lunar soil were captured during a reconnaissance mission. The image was archived for almost a decade until it was removed from the internal database, according to him. This type of content is filtered before any public availability, and all material outside the geological or atmospheric standard is automatically classified as Visual Anomaly Type 7, preventing access by standard-level employees. Secret audios also circulate among researchers. One of the most impactful is attributed to an orbital mission not disclosed to the public, in which a communication in English can be clearly heard being interrupted by a sequence of harmonic noises, almost like metallic chants interspersed with pulsations. The audio, leaked by a third-party technician working on a NASA maintenance contract, was removed from all platforms in less than 48 hours. The version that still survives on the deep web presents sound oscillations that audio experts classified as incompatible with any natural interference or known equipment failure. There is also the case of astronaut Gordon Cooper, who on several occasions declared that he had seen flying objects of unknown origin during his flights. In an interview with the National Press Club, Cooper revealed that he had witnessed a spacecraft flying over a military base while NASA cameras captured everything. According to him, the film was immediately sent for analysis and never returned. Cooper stated, "It's not just that NASA knows, it's that they actively participate in the cover-up." Many of these documents and reports were leaked, not because they were revealed intentionally, but because someone decided to take the risk. These are men and women who understood the impact that this information could have on the future of humanity. People who know that the question, "Are we alone in the universe?" there is already an answer, and that it is no longer being discussed in scientific rooms, but rather in control rooms with red lights flashing, audible alerts being triggered, and protocols being followed to prevent the truth from leaking out. These are just some of the evidence that, when analyzed together, form a pattern. And standards don't lie. When former employees, confidential documents, failed live broadcasts, and sound recordings begin to converge in the same direction, we are no longer dealing with theory. We are facing a scenario that needs to be investigated, exposed, and understood. If you've come this far and feel this needs to be discussed, comment below. I want the truth. Now, if you are already sure that there is something being hidden from humanity, write that contact is real. And pay attention to what's coming now, because we're going to analyze precisely the points that official scientists use to try to refute all of this. Only this time, you will see both sides. Despite all the evidence, leaks, audio testimonies, and confidential documents that suggest something much bigger is happening away from the public eye, the official stance of NASA and most of the traditional scientific community continues to be one of absolute denial. The standard explanation offered by the U.S. Space Agency is simple and repetitive. Reports of unidentified flying objects are just that, unidentified. And, according to them, unidentified does not in any way mean extraterrestrial. It's a response that's carefully constructed, polished, approved by multiple departments, and used repeatedly whenever the issue threatens to gain traction. Scientists linked to NASA, claim that any visual anomaly captured by probes or telescopes can be explained through poorly understood natural phenomena. Light reflections, cosmic particles, electromagnetic interference, or, in more extreme cases, simple equipment failures. This even includes those images in which geometric structures appear on lunar or Martian surfaces, or signs that repeat in very specific mathematical patterns. According to them, everything can and should be interpreted with caution and within the limits of the scientific method. In official statements, NASA spokespeople usually reinforce that the agency does not have concrete evidence of intelligent extraterrestrial life, and that all initiatives to search for alien signals are carried out in an open, transparent manner, and with a purely scientific focus. SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, for example, which is a project supported by scientists and institutions, has always been treated as a theoretical search based on statistical probabilities, and never as an operation that has already been successful in capturing something real and intentional. But there is something strange about this narrative, because at the same time that NASA insists that there is nothing to hide, it also prevents full access to many of its files. Several requests made via FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, a law that guarantees the right of any American citizen to access government documents, are denied on the grounds of national security or material sensitive to institutional stability. And then an uncomfortable question arises. If there is nothing to hide, why the need to hide it? Another point that is often raised by skeptical scientists is that if there really were intelligent life communicating with Earth, this event would be so huge that it would be impossible to contain. They say that the leak would be inevitable, that the data would end up becoming public knowledge in a clear, unquestionable way. But the argument weakens when we look at NASA's internal structure, its ability to control the flow of information, and, most importantly, its contracts with the United States government. The truth is that the agency operates at different levels of access, and not even all of its own employees have full knowledge of the missions or the analyses being carried out. Furthermore, there is a growing movement within the alternative scientific community that has been questioning the criteria used to disregard possible evidence of contact. Why are signals that repeat themselves with mathematical exactitude quickly dismissed as coincidence? Why are structures detected on moons of Jupiter or Saturn, which do not look like natural formations, ignored in the final reports? And why are the astronauts themselves, when they decide to speak openly about what they saw in space, are systematically discredited, as if they were victims of hallucination or misperception? A clear example is the case of Buzz Aldrin II, man to set foot on the moon on more than one occasion. He mentioned having seen lights moving parallel to the lunar module during the Apollo 11 mission. He even said that it was not part of the spacecraft, nor any known equipment. NASA's official response: solar reflection on a panel. End of discussion. No in-depth investigation. No more detailed study. Just a quick, shallow, throwaway explanation. Enough to appease public opinion and end the conversation. There is also the academic fear factor. Many scientists have their careers threatened if they decide to explore topics related to extraterrestrial life outside the official line. Universities and research institutions often discourage this type of study, considering it risky for the reputation of those involved. In other words, there is a cultural and institutional blockade that prevents the debate from expanding. A type of subtle censorship where anyone who dares to think differently is isolated, labeled as eccentric or conspiracist. And this raises an even more serious question. Could it be that the scientific method itself, used as a shield by NASA and its defenders, is not being manipulated to keep certain information out of the public's reach? When you only agree to study what you already believe to be possible, what you are doing is not science. It is indoctrination. In the end, NASA's denial is not just based on evidence, but on a policy of narrative control. When something escapes, be it an image, an audio, or the testimony of someone who saw too much, the response is always the same: discredit, slow down, disperse. They do not directly attack the content. They attack whoever presents it, and that in itself should already be a warning sign. Meanwhile, the agency itself continues to expand its presence in the space, increasingly daring missions. Explorations on frozen moons with the potential to harbor subterranean oceans. Expeditions to asteroids, supposedly to study the origin of the solar system. But what if all of this is also part of something bigger? What if these missions are connected to data that has already been obtained, but that the public cannot or should not know yet? And this is where the most important question resurfaces with more force than ever. If there really is no life out there, if NASA really never made contact, if this is all just a misunderstanding, then why so much effort to hide, silence, and label any attempt at revelation as a conspiracy theory? If you're feeling like there's something wrong with this whole story, comment below. Science does not hide. If you've noticed that there is a silent war between what NASA shows and what it actually knows, write hidden truth. And get ready, because what comes now is the most unpredictable moment in the video. A turning point that could completely change your perception of space, Earth, and the history of humanity itself. But what if I told you that behind all these denials, behind the cold, scientific, and supposedly rational explanations, there is something that simply cannot be ignored anymore? What if specific information coming directly from behind the scenes at NASA is the missing piece to tear down this entire wall of silence built over decades? Because among so many obfuscated reports, hidden documents, and ignored signals, one of them in particular completely changed the way many independent researchers see NASA's real role in this story. This information came from a former employee of the agency itself, a man who worked for more than 15 years in the cosmic signal monitoring sector, within an area known informally as Deep Space Listening Post, one of the least accessible and most restricted departments in NASA's internal structure. His account, made in an interview that was immediately taken down hours after its publication, is direct, disturbing, and incredibly specific. We received a clear signal, with a mathematical repeating pattern coming from a region close to the Reticulum constellation, and we were prohibited from investigating. The orders came from above with the maximum level of restriction. We were instructed to delete the records and classify them as space noise. According to him, this signal not only went against everything expected to be found in terms of natural emissions from deep space, but also had a rhythm, a cadence that indicated intentionality. It wasn't static. It wasn't random. It was, in his own words, a pattern that seemed to be waiting for us. This type of report, coming from someone who is inside the system and who decided to put his career and safety at risk to make this public, is the type of breach of expectation that no skeptic can ignore. And the most impressive thing is that, during the same period, 2 other signals were captured by independent radio telescopes, with no direct connection to NASA, but which operate in similar bands. One of them, recorded by a university team in Australia, showed almost identical features: pauses in exact milliseconds, pulsations in binary code, and an extremely unusual frequency signature. The team even sent the data to NASA in hopes of scientific collaboration. The answer? Absolute silence. No confirmation. Data requests. No returns. What many researchers have begun to realize is that this repetition of patterns ignored signals, deleted files, gag orders forms a structure, a modus operandi, a behavior that does not match the objective of any scientific agency which should seek knowledge, truth, and understanding of the universe. But NASA not only avoids delving deeper into these investigations, it blocks, omits, and, when necessary, erases any trace that threatens to pierce the bubble of the official version. And this specific report about a possibly intelligent signal coming from Reticulum opens a new chapter in this story, because it suggests something that until then was only imagined: the possibility that NASA had already received a message, a direct communication, and consciously chosen not to respond. And here comes the scariest element of all: the reason behind the silence. The former employee stated that, at the moment he questioned why the investigation had been closed, he heard from his immediate superior a phrase that still echoes in discussions about this case today. There are things that not even we should understand. This statement, at once vague and threatening, raises a series of hypotheses. Has contact already been established? Was the answer given? What exactly was said in this sign to justify such control? So much censorship, so much fear. And the most curious thing, or perhaps the most disturbing thing, is that reports like this are not isolated. In different countries with different space agencies, there are similar records: unexplained signals, attempts to investigate blocked, reports ended abruptly. But within NASA, this seems to happen with a frequency beyond chance, almost as if there were an invisible filter that separates what the world can know from what should never be revealed. If up until now you thought this was all just misunderstandings, get ready, because the next part of this research will present elements that even NASA has not been able to completely hide. The truth is slipping through the cracks, and perhaps we are closer than ever to something that will rewrite human history. If this made you think differently, comment below. They are listening. And if you believe that NASA already crossed the line of silence a long time ago, write the signal was real. Because now, let's move straight to the next revelation, and it will shake up your perception of everything you believed about space. If this information is indeed true, if NASA indeed received a signal, it's an intelligent message coming from some remote point in the universe and decided to completely silence any investigation, then the inevitable question that hangs in the air is, why? Why hide something so monumental? Why stop the world from knowing that we are not alone? And more. What does this say about us as a species? Perhaps the reason is not just politics, geopolitics, or the interests of great powers. Perhaps the answer lies in fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the collapse of entire systems that have been built over centuries based on the idea that the Earth is the center of human experience in the cosmos. Because if we confirm that there is another form of intelligent life, and more than that, we confirm that this form of life has already communicated with us, everything changes. Absolutely everything. Entire religions would have to reevaluate their doctrines. Economic and social models based on exclusivity and control would lose meaning. And, above all, human arrogance. That sense of superiority that made us believe that we are the only ones capable of understanding the universe would fall to the ground like a sandcastle in the face of an uncontrollable tide. Imagine the impact of this on the collective mind, in children who grew up believing that Earth is the only habitable home, in adults who have shaped their lives around values and beliefs based on cosmic isolation. Now, think about something even deeper. What if this contact not only happened, but happens constantly? What if humanity is observed, monitored, perhaps even guided by something that is far beyond our ability to understand? It's not just about alien life. It is about breaking an existential barrier. The definitive transition from an isolated civilization to a cosmic civilization. A transition that, like every major change in the history of humanity, carries with it the weight of doubt, resistance, and transformation. Are we really ready for this truth? Is humanity, with its wars, divisions, prejudices, and greed, mature enough to face the idea that we are not the most evolved, that we are not the most advanced? that perhaps we are just part of a much larger, much older, much more complex network than we can ever imagine. What if this is exactly why the information is hidden? What if those at the top of the chain of command within NASA and other agencies knew the shock would be too great? Not just a shakeup of institutional structures, but a collapse of identity. Because accepting that there are others out there, that these others have already come into contact with our species, requires humility. It requires courage. It requires a total reconfiguration of our understanding of reality. But what if it's the opposite? What if silence is not to protect us, but to keep us in the dark? What if contact has already taken place, but the interests behind the secrecy are much more earthly than heavenly? Interests that involve power, technological advantage, dominance over narratives, and manipulation of the time in which things are revealed or hidden. After all, information is the new weapon, and a revelation of this magnitude, when controlled by a few, can be used as blackmail, as a tool of influence, or as a geopolitical trump card. A government that has contact with extraterrestrial life automatically becomes a superpower above the others. And who would guarantee that this information would be used for the common good? If all of this is happening, if there has already been contact, if it has been ignored or hidden, if there is an intelligence out there trying to communicate with us, the question we need to ask ourselves is not why aren't they coming to us, but rather, is their response being blocked by ourselves? It's hard to imagine that the truth could be so close and, at the same time, so out of our reach. But this possibility opens a philosophical window that we can no longer ignore. Because, deep down, this search is not just about them. It's about us, about who we are, about what we want to be, and about how willing we are to face the unknown. Now comment below if you believe humanity is ready. He writes, "We are ready if you think the world should already know everything," or comment, "The truth is still scary," if you believe that we still don't have the structure to deal with what may be coming. Because the next point we are going to address is perhaps the most symbolic of all, and may reveal why some voices are so insistent on keeping this story completely silent after everything you've seen so far. After every piece of data, every report, every suppressed piece of evidence, every covered-up audio, and every ignored signal, it's impossible not to wonder, why exactly are they so afraid of us knowing? What is so dangerous about admitting that NASA may have had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations? What would happen if this information was finally released, not as rumor, but as official, irrefutable truth? What would change in your way of seeing the world, your faith, your trust in institutions, your routine? By now, you may have realized that this subject goes far beyond a conspiracy theory. He touches on something deep, almost instinctive: our right to know. The truth about what's out there shouldn't be the privilege of a few men in secret. NASA, offices or authorities with access to confidential files. The truth belongs to all of us, because we are all part of the same planet. We are all children of the same Earth, looking at the same sky, asking the same questions since the beginning. Of humanity, are we alone? What if the answer was always there? Hidden between cut transmissions, encrypted audio, leaked documents, and eyes that saw more than they should have. If all of this has been contained so far, it is not for lack of evidence. It's because of excess control. And there is only one way to break this cycle, by making this issue impossible to ignore. Making the search for truth a collective movement. A force that grows with each new attentive look, with each new restless mind, with each person like you who is here now, connecting the dots that many still don't even see. From that moment on, you are no longer just a spectator. You are part of this journey, and your opinion matters much more than you imagine. So, comment below what you believe. Do you think NASA has ever communicated with aliens? Do you believe that this contact already happened but was hidden from humanity? Or do you still have questions and want to see more evidence? If you've made it this far, it's because this video messed with you in some way. Maybe it awakened questions that were dormant. Maybe it sparked that feeling that there's something much bigger going on behind the scenes at NASA, and that we only see the tip of the iceberg. If this content made sense to you, if it made you reflect, if it impacted you, then this channel is your place. Here, we investigate what no one has the courage to show. We connect the dots, expose what is hidden, and brings to light the truths that many try to silence. And this is only possible because there is a strong community behind it. A community like the one you can be part of from now on. So subscribe to the channel right now and activate the bell, because with each new video, we'll go even deeper into the evidence, documents, hidden audio, and everything that NASA and other space agencies they don't want you to see. And so I know that you are one of those go to the end. 2. That they want the truth no matter what the cost. Comment below. The truth cannot be hidden. This will be our secret code. Whoever comments on this, I will know. They are together in this search. They are on my side in this mission. See you in the next video. And don't forget, the truth is out there, and here too.